Yeah. I mean, 2017 was when things really began to take off. I made my Broadway debut. And then after that, I was just working with stars, basically. I was like, wow, I can't believe this. I mean, I'm just some kid from Virginia, basically. But 2020 came along and everything shut down. And it's funny because for the first 3 months of 2020, I was totally in the COVIDian cult. And, I was messaging my friends with statistics and like warnings and stocking up on food and supplies and everything. And then at a certain point, though, I was like, this is a little weird. I have some questions. This is not making sense. And apparently I was one of the only people in the entire theater industry or entertainment industry who was openly speaking up and saying, we can't lock down forever. We shouldn't be locking down. We shouldn't be closing schools. Mm-hmm. Then the year after that, in March 2021, that's when the vaccine mandates came down. And for me, I'd already caught the disease in December of 2020. So I was like, well, why should I have to, get inoculated against a disease that I've already gotten? And on top of that, I mean, these things were rushed out so quickly and yada, yada. I mean, there were all kinds of questions that I had. And I was just like, I'm not taking these. And I was also very, very outspoken about, we shouldn't be locking down and we shouldn't be coercing people to take these drugs. I mean, it's insane to me. As you might imagine, the consequences were quite swift and devastating. I lost my my manager, my voiceover agent ended up dropping me as well. All that momentum I built up, everything that I built up was just, that was it. It was like it didn't really matter. And on top of all of that, there was all of the political unrest, which I was like, I have to say something about this as well. I can't keep my mouth shut about these things. It gets me into trouble. So I went from basically literally working with stars, people being like, why are you not famous? Are you an asshole or something? Mm-hmm. And to waiting tables with 20-year-olds in Atlanta, Georgia. I joke about it that typically what you do is that you wait tables until you make it, but I made it and then went to waiting tables. My life makes no sense. So that was pretty depressing and devastating. And I was just like, I'm 40 years old now. I spent half my life doing this one thing. And now what am I going to do now? I have no idea what I was going to do.
Were people like, was anybody privately kind of saying to you, yeah, I had some concerns. Dude, why don't you just take the shot, man? Just, was anyone talking like that, or were they all looking at you like you are a monster?
There were a couple of people who privately were like, man, I agree with you. They didn't, encourage me to take it, but they were like, I agree with you. I totally get it. There's one guy who's actually in the Harry Potter show on Broadway right now. And, he had just had a daughter and, he was like, I'm with you, man. But, this is a great paycheck and a great gig and I got to take care of my family and everything. And, but then publicly, like there was one actor named Chad Kimball who was a Tony nominee for a play called Memphis a while ago. And he got a lot of heat when I think he was in Washington at the time. And Governor Inslee had these ridiculous restrictions about like, you can't sing in church. And so Chad tweeted about, I will not let, some governor keep me from tweeting and worshiping my Lord or whatever. And theater Twitter just tore him to shreds. And people were just saying stuff like, I hope to never be in a rehearsal room with you. You're awful. You're a killer, yada, yada, yada. And I jumped in and I was like, well, Chad's right. You know what I mean? He's talking about government overreach. Like, that's what he's talking about. Mm-hmm. And, then I got dragged into it, and then, of course, if you take any sort of stance on the vaccine, that's just, you're a monster. And for me, I was never any sort of advocate against vaccines or against the concept of vaccination. I just had an ethical problem with the mandates. But, that level of nuance was not allowed. And that was the end of it all.
Huh. Okay. And was it the specific, was it just literally the law, or was it like the specific venues were saying on their own authority, no, like any show that's going to take place in this theater, everyone's got to be vaccinated?
Yeah, well, it was really bizarre. The theater industry in particular, but the entertainment industry in general, really, I'd say was sort of an outlier. I mean, we all know it's a very far left industry, and they reacted in such an extreme fashion. I mean, to the extent where when we were coming back to work, when we were trying to negotiate the union was trying to talk about, how to get back to work. I mean, it was stuff like, we're going to cancel backstage visits. We're going to cancel stage dooring after the shows. We're going to cancel, if we have silverware, we have to have it individually wrapped, and, all kinds of just, minutia and just micromanaged, like just crazy stuff. So it was just a huge extreme reaction to it. But the thing is that the unions, both Actors Equity, which is the Stage Actors Union, and SAG-AFTRA, the Film Actors Union, were just all in on this stuff. And they were saying, from the perspective of protecting their members,
right?
They're talking about, and Equity was very strange, because they said they pretty much presumed from the jump that all companies were going to be fully vaccinated. There was never, ever they never made any sort of leeway for people to say no. It was very, very strange, to the point where I think, I wonder if there's some kind of corruption going on. I have no evidence of that, but I just wonder about that. But basically what happened is that every single theater company or production company imposed these mandates. And Hamilton was the first show to come out and say forcefully, if you want to work on this show, every single person backstage, in the house, on stage, will have to be vaccinated. And after that, Hamilton is the big show on Broadway, and everyone else followed suit right after that. So you couldn't go anywhere, even in small, like random community theaters or dinner theaters in the smallest town ever were using these mandates. So there was nowhere you could work if you didn't get the shot or you didn't fake it, which I refused to do anyway. So it was an industry-wide thing. And people said, oh, you can get exemptions, yada, 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 but that's nonsense. No one I know got any exemption. Like, there was a friend of mine who, her daughter was blinded in one eye by a childhood vaccine. She could not get an exemption. Her son died 12 hours after taking the J&J, and it's just, there's all kinds of things that was just really weird about it. And, you couldn't get a job. Mm-hmm. And, and even to this day, there are still people there are still productions demanding that you be updated, in your vaccinations. It's just, that's a whole other tangent. I don't know if they'll really ever let it go or ever be right again. Mm-hmm. But yeah, long story short, man, there was nowhere you could work.